And then you gotta hustle for for your community, man. Like you gotta go all out for them, and you gotta like show them that like I go all out for you guys because you deserve it. And I think if you do that, you end up building a really happy place. And when you build that, people want to come.
Welcome to How to Build a Nonprofit, the only podcast dedicated to deep dive interviews with nonprofit founders about their journey, their why, board development, fundraising, staffing, leadership, and making a big impact. We ask courageous and visionary founders about their struggles and successes and everything in between. As a listener, all you have to do is learn and appreciate. I'm your host, Jordan Thierry, and this is How to Build a Nonprofit. If you're like me, you probably think the worst advice we should give young people is to get deeper into video games. But the work Damon Packwood is doing through his organization, Gameheads, is flipping that kind of assumption on its back and changing my perspective on gaming altogether. He started with the idea of leveraging the growing gaming industry as a pathway out of poverty and towards a creative and meaningful career for youth, and has seen extraordinary success. In this episode, I interview the visionary behind Gameheads as he shares his journey from growing up in San Francisco to founding a groundbreaking organization in Oakland. Discover how Damon's strategic partnership approach and dedication to community led to the creation of a unique program that bridges the gap between tech and underrepresented youth. He discusses how Gameheads is shaping the future of the gaming industry and empowering the next generation of tech leaders. It's an awesome example of the magic that can happen when you invest in building relationships and are prepared to seize the moment. All this and more in today's episode, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. For more episode content, grant and fellowship opportunities, visit howtobuildanonprofit.org. All right, Damon, we're live. Man, thanks for joining the podcast today. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's Friday. So
yeah, we're wrapping on a Friday. I'm ready for the weekend to start. I'm sure you are too.
I just want a beer in the game. That's all I want.
I feel it, man. Well, excited to jump in and talk about Gameheads. I have not had an organization like yours on the podcast yet, so really interested to hear about the work that you're doing and the journey, of building this organization. So why don't we start with you just telling us a little bit about your background? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up, and how'd you, if you're not from Oakland, how did you end up in Oakland?
Yeah. I well, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is really cool. It's a nice way to end my day. This is my last thing I'm gonna do today, so that's cool. I don't have to write no grants. I don't have to work on no spreadsheets. I can just talk to the homies. It's all good.
Exactly.
So yeah, I was born and raised in San Francisco, actually. But the crazy thing about San Francisco when I was growing up was Oakland wasn't like this other universe. You know what I mean? Like if you were a black dude in San Francisco, you most likely had cousins and family over in Oakland. So you were always there. So it wasn't a big deal when I decided to move to Oakland. We actually lived in Oakland for about 4 years. It turns out now I live in the same neighborhood that we used to live at.
Oh,
That we used to live in I think when I was in middle school or something like that.
Okay.
So I bought a house in the same neighborhood. But yeah, I grew up in a working class family, typical black family, big family, a lot of brothers and sisters, tons of cousins. I grew up in those families where my grandma had 13 kids, and so I had 13 aunts and uncles, and then they had 5 kids each. So I had hella aunties and I had hella cousins. So we were like a big family. Grew up in the Mission District, or at least that's where they lived. And then we used to move around to from the Fillmore to the Mission District to Lakeview, Hunters Point, Diamond Heights. So we were spread out all over. And my family was really big on church. They worked in parks and recs. My godfather was a longshoreman. My dad was a bus driver. So they were just regular working class folks, man. And we were really we were raised in the community. I was always at parks and recs. I was always at community centers. I was always at longshoreman meetings because my uncle was the president at one point. So I just grew up with a sense of community, I used to have to or when I was young, I used to have to work with senior citizens because my grandmother used to work with senior citizens before she decided to retire. So that was just baked into who I was. And I was always doing camps. like Camp Mendocino or Pine Lake Camp or Boys and Girls Club or chess club or tennis club. But I think that what changed my life was Upward Bound. So I was in Upward Bound from like ninth grade to 12th grade. Like I knew I wanted to go to college, but nobody in my family had been to college. So my mom
Right.
was like, yo, I don't really know how to help you with this, but these people do. So like I know you're in the ninth grade. I know you probably want to enjoy your summers, but if you give up your summer, you do this program, like I think you'll be okay. So I made the decision and I just gave up my summers every summer.
Yeah.
And every
Wow.
Saturday I was at USF taking classes. Every summer I was in a camp. And I ended up graduating, was the first of my family to go to college. I went to UC Santa Barbara. And, I was a hood kid. You know what I mean? I grew up in a
Mhm.
hood. So to go to Santa Barbara,
Yeah, it's a different kind of environment.
yeah, it was a trip. Like, it was just like, like you living by the beach and
Yeah.
like the golden arches at McDonald's is actually gold. You know what I mean? Like it was a trip. And I was just like, whoa, like this is like, I didn't know I was poor until I went to Santa Barbara. I was like, "Oh,
Right.
wait a minute. Like I'm really low income. Like I didn't know.
Right.
Like people would tell me I was low income and I'd be like, no, I'm not. Like, no, I'm not,
I eat
but
every day. Right.
I eat
Mhm.
every day, it might be some
Yeah.
government cheese, but I'm eating.
Right.
And then you go to Santa Barbara and you see how they living and you're like, whoa, like
Right.
I'm rolling
Right.
up with like trash bags with my clothes in them and like
Right.
they got Gucci bags and cars and whatnot and like
Right.
closet full of sneakers. And I'm just like, oh. So,
That's
I just
crazy.
learned like that's how the other half lives, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I was originally a film studies major, long story short, right? And I wanted to do the film thing in Hollywood, but I went back to San Francisco and I was working for KGO Radio, Disney owned station. They had the Channel 5 news there and everything. And I was volunteering at Upward Bound as a tutor. And I just one day felt like I was needed there more with the young people. Like, yeah, man, when I was working at KGO, like I was in marketing and all I did was like do things for all of the radio personalities and the TV personalities. And then one day I just stopped coming to work. It was the only job I've ever had where I just like stopped coming to work. And they was calling me, I wouldn't pick up. And I've never done that before. And it was,
Yeah.
and I was full in on Upward Bound. And I did that for 7 years. They made me full time. Then I went from Upward Bound to Juma Ventures, which was a social venture. It was social entrepreneurship. And one year I realized that all of the students that I had worked with over 10 years that were going to college was coming back and they wasn't getting jobs. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And then there was this thing in the Bay called the tech industry. And I was like, what the heck is the tech industry? So I long story short, I quit my job at Juma Ventures because I was like, yo, man, I think I'm going to be out of a job in a couple of years because I was doing college access, right? But it wasn't working. And I was like, I think we're all going to be out of a job in a couple of years. So I could write and I understood the game industry because I really liked playing video games, and games at that time was a lot like the film industry. It felt like the beginning of the film industry, like in terms
Okay.
of like a historian. So I convinced this guy that I could write. His name was Dan Shu. He was over at this website called Bitmob, and he hired me for free. And I was just there to like write articles and help out with the site. But I had a press pass, and that press pass allowed me to call people and get into events to figure out what the tech industry was and figure out what the gaming industry was. And the first thing I realized when I was there was like there was no brothers and there was no women and there was no Latinos and like nobody was there. And I didn't get mad about it because at the time everybody was pissed about it. I was like, yo, this is an opportunity, but I needed to know more. So I went to graduate school and then I just so happened to like fall into the tech diversity scene here in Oakland. By then I had moved to Oakland, and the tech diversity scene with Hidden Genius Project and Black Girls
Right.
Code, Kimberly Bryant and the K Poor
Okay.
Center
Cool.
and
Yeah.
Van Jones and everything. And Van invited me to this event. It's a true story. It's an event and I'm sitting in this room and I didn't know this, but Van thought I was working on my PhD at UC Berkeley. I was working on my master's degree at Cal State East Bay. And I'm in this room with all of these heavy hitters. They're all like CEOs of their own organizations, like, and they're all in there and they're talking about like, how do we create like a big event around tech diversity? And they were talking about bringing it to the Essence Music Festival. And I'm like, yo, I'm geeking out. I walk out the room I called my friend. I'm like, yo, what do I do? I probably shouldn't be here because I'm
Yeah.
just a student.
Right.
And they're like, no, you better go in there and pretend like you belong. So I went in there and everybody was posing for a picture, Jordan. So I'm sitting there and I'm posing and I'm like, who are we? What? I said, what's going on? And they're like, well, Prince is behind the camera. And I'm like, well, what organization is he from? And they're like, no, man, it's Prince. And I'm like, who's that, the homie? They're like, no, man, it's Prince. Like, we not taking a picture, like, he behind the camera. And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, like, he behind the camera, man. Like, it's Prince. Like, shut up, right? So I'm sitting there like, whoa. It turns out Prince was friends with Van Jones. Him and Van was talking about bringing all of these, like, tech nonprofits to the Essence Music Festival. That was the year Prince performed at the Essence Music Festival. He had never performed at the Essence Music Festival before, but he told them he would perform if they allow all of these tech folks to come out and do like activations down there. And then I ended up getting a job with one of the orgs that was in the room and I was able to go. And when we got back, we was like, all right, let's keep this going. And I noticed that nobody was doing things around games. And there was a OG that told me, they was like, look, man, like nobody really understands your vision. The vision belongs to the visionary. And I was just like, dang, you right. And that was the beginning of me putting it together. That was the beginning.
That down. The vision belongs to the visionary. That's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
So what is your relationship history with video games?
Yeah, well, I started off, I remember back when I was in college, I used to work at this video store called Emerald Video. And, I was a film studies major. So I'm like
Yeah.
watching movies all day. I'm taking classes on Akira Kurosawa, Sergio Leone, Alfred Hitchcock. And then my brother calls me up. He's like, yo, man, you got to play this game. I'm like, what game? He's like, you got to play this game called Resident Evil. So I
Okay.
was like,
Okay.
remember Blockbuster Games? You could
Yeah.
rent games. And you could rent consoles. I didn't have one. So I went to Blockbuster, I rented a console, and I rented Resident Evil, a game called Final Fantasy VII, and Metal Gear. And I took them home and I played them. And I was like, yo, man, these games is like movies.
Yeah.
So I went back to my boss and I said, yo, you need to start investing in this now. I was like, I said, movie industry is over. Like,
Yeah.
this is going to be it. Like, I just sat all night playing a video game for like, 15 hours. I ain't never sat through a 15-hour movie. You know what I mean? And so a couple years later, I ended up getting that job and I was working in the game industry as a journalist and I was able to meet people and learn about the industry and how it worked. And, I really kind of got my foot in the door. And then when I went and got my graduate degree, like that was sort of my specialty. I got a graduate degree in interactive media, but my focus was around, it was more around kind of like diversity in tech, but I was very, very interested in the gaming industry. And so that's kind of like, how like as a journalist and, as a person who kind of understood the connection between games and movies and how the gaming industry started to borrow a lot of the same techniques from the film industry. But then the game industry had figured out a way to like break all these rules that you couldn't do in film. Like you couldn't shoot an actor from like you couldn't put a camera behind his head
Right.
and just let him walk around all day. But the gaming industry was like, well, no, actually, you could use that angle, but just like you control whatever the guy does.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that can work. And I remember seeing that. And I was like, yo, man, that's Alfred Hitchcock's shot. But like, no,
Mhm.
that's Spike Lee's shot. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
that's Akira Kurosawa's shot. But I get to control it and I'm like playing it for like 10 hours and I'm not bored. I'm like, yo, this is game changing right here. So like, that's kind of how it started.
And so from what point, when someone dropped that knowledge on you that the vision belongs to the visionary,
Mhm.
from then to you actually starting the organization, like tell us about that period.
Yeah, I worked for this organization called Hack the Hood, and we were doing programs out of this space called United Roots. And I got close with the CEO. His name was Galen. So I remember, I was working with the students, but the students weren't really paying attention to any work. And like they were always playing video games. Like I always had this saying when I was working in education, like pay attention to what your students are doing when they're not doing what you told them to do, because that's what they prefer to do. And then you need to make whatever it is you want them to learn, it has to apply to what it is that they're doing when you ain't around. So they was playing games and I was just like, that's actually kind of dope because if you break down a game, like there's a lot of like, interesting components. Like level design is architecture, sound design is like making beats and things like that, right? Like that's audio engineering. And then there's of course coding, and then there's game design, which is really about user experiences. There's artificial intelligence. There's all of these things, right? So I was like, these guys are, they're smarter than they think. So I was like, look, man, if you do your work, I'll teach you about these games. But I thought they were lying. I mean, I was lying, and they thought
They
that I
thought you
was
was like,
serious.
yeah.
So anyway, after a couple of weeks, I started teaching them stuff during lunchtime, and then that turned into like they wanted to meet after program hours. So the guy that owned the spot, Galen, gave me keys, and he was like, "Look, man, if you want to come in and like use the space and teach them stuff, like that's cool. Just lock up afterwards." He showed me how to lock up, so I always had keys to the spot. So years later, when I decided to kind of spin off and do this on my own, I still had the keys. Like I stopped working for Hack the Hood, but Galen never took the keys back. So then I told Galen, I was like, "Yo, man, I think I want to do this Gameheads." It wasn't called Gameheads at the time. I said, but I was like, I think I want to do this thing I've been doing with the students. Like, what do you think about me coming in on Saturdays? And he was like, "We not open, but you can come in." So I would come in on Saturdays, and then after a while, he was like, "Yo, man, why don't you let me be your fiscal sponsor?" So I was like, all right. And then he was like, what do you think about me writing you into a grant and I'll give you 30,000? I said, for real? He said, yeah, I'll give you 30 grand. I'll write you into a grant. And if the California endowment, if they're filling it, you'll have a little startup money. We'll see what happens. And true to his word, he did it. And I quit my job. I just did Game His full time for a couple of months, and I started having impact. Like the first big thing that happened was I took this like makeshift curriculum that I put together, and I told the students to build a game using Little Big Planet. And they built this game about grief.
Mm,
And I was like, whoa. I said, what? I said, yo, man, who gave you this idea?
yeah.
And it was like, nah, it's us. And they built it. And it was about like these two kids that had to like find each other in a dream. Or no, they found each other in a dream, but they had to find each other in the real world. And in the dream, they found like hints. It was crazy, dude. They built a website. They had art around it, and they're like, "Yeah, man, it's all about like you have to play it with somebody because we deal with grief alone, so we want other kids to play it together." And I was just like, "Yo, man, who taught you all of this?" And they was like, "No, we came up with it." They had artwork for it. They had the levels laid out. So I said, "Yo, man, I think you guys should submit this to a competition." And they submitted it, and I didn't think anything of it, but they won. But it wasn't just any competition, it was the White House.
What? For real?
This was the Obama administration did this competition. They flew him out to the White House, gave him $1,000 in seed capital and free tickets to E3. And when they got back, I was just like, "Yo, man, y'all wanna keep doing this?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, cool, man. Don't tell your parents." 'Cause I didn't I was it wasn't a real thing at the
Right.
time, and they told their parents showed up and was like, "Yo, man, if you gonna have my kids for the on Saturday, it's all good, but I want them to go to college." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And then I was like, "Yo, don't tell your friends," and then they showed up with their friends. So I had more students, and so I had to, like, keep building, you know what I mean? And that was how it blew up. Like, we just kept building it. I think after a year, I applied to the Echo and Green Fellowship, and I got it. And that was, like, $80,000, and then they helped me build like, I was in a legit business, like a social entrepreneurship fellowship, which I didn't know at the time was, like, the biggest fellowship in the world.
Yeah.
And I got it first try because they were like, we've never heard of an idea like this." And then that was the beginning, man. Like that was the beginning of us blowing up. The next year, I think that was 2016, we applied to that Obama fellowship one last time before he left, and four of my students won.
So, you were in the BMA Echo and Green Fellowship, the
Yep.
the Black Male
Yep.
Achievement one? Yeah, that's dope. And so you would say your founding year was 2016?
We started Gameheads in 2015. Yeah, 2015. I was a BMA fellow in 2016. But the prototype year was 2014. We were officially a nonprofit in 2015.
Okay, bet. Well, so you're wrapping up your 10th year anniversary, huh?
Our 10th year anniversary was last year. This is our 11th year.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's right. Funny, yeah. Well, congratulations on that, man. So 2016, you got the Echo and Green Fellowship. They infused you with some cash for a couple of years, right? At what point were you able to, start doing this full time? Was it before then? Or were you still hustling and doing other gigs on the side?
No, I started like, as soon as I got that first 30,000, that was my salary.
Okay. Okay.
And I was just like, I was hustling at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the crazy thing is I had just got married. So I'm like, I'm telling my wife, like, I think I want to do this thing with video games.
Right. Right. Right.
And I had $30,000 to my name, and she was just like, she was like, let's see what happens. And I was like, let me
Yeah.
try. So I had to like,
Yeah.
and
Get
then we
right
had
on it.
just bought a house, bro. So I had a
Yeah. The Bay
mortgage.
too. Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I got to make this work.
Yeah.
So I was hustling hard for that year and, trying to build relationship with the gaming industry, which took a while. And then, yeah, I ended up, I was full time since the beginning, since
Okay.
2015. Yeah.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about how the Echoing Green Fellowship impacted or affected you? We had someone, I don't know if she was in your cohort, Rachel Farias, on the podcast recently. She may have been
Hmm.
2015.
Okay.
She helps
I
women
definitely know her then.
do the Esquire apprentice legal apprenticeship work to become lawyers, also based in the Bay. So she talked about the fellowship, and so I'd love to hear from you, like how Echoing Green Fellowship supported your work and what it did for y'all as an organization.
Yeah, man. I mean, my whole goal for creating Gameheads was really when I started seeing working class communities displaced in the Bay Area because we just didn't understand tech, right? Like our schools didn't prepare us for the tech industry, and I just didn't think that was fair. So I wanted to do something about it. And at the time, everybody was talking about coding, but as somebody who had just finished graduate school and I was learning how to code, I knew how hard that was. And I was like, the tech industry is more than just coding, but like, how do you create a program that's built around tech that's fun for students, right? And so that's where the gaming thing came in. But at the heart of it, it was really about like, how do we find creative ways to keep them in the Bay and not just keep them in the Bay, and they just getting by? Like, how do they thrive in the Bay? So you have to understand when I'm out hustling, like trying to get funding for that, and that's my pitch. And I'm in Silicon Valley pitching people, like they're just like, the hell you talking about?
Yeah.
They're like, so like this ain't making nobody. Are you making a game? I'm like, nah, nah, nah. It's like, oh, so you trying to get some kids that don't know how to make games and you're gonna teach them how to make games, right? So it wasn't nobody listening to us, and I realized like it was depressing, man. But when I got the Echo and Green Fellowship, I met people that were like me, where they were like realizing that there was need. And I came to realize that Echo and Green was just like all of these really, really smart people. And that was the thing. Like I thought I was just dumb. I was just like, I just got my graduate degree and I'm out here trying to create this video game program and the students love it, but like maybe this is just a dumb idea. Like maybe I'm just like tripping. And when I got to Echo and Green, I started meeting people like that were all over the world. And the thing that was crazy is they thought I was the smart one. And these people were like brilliant, man, like Penn State graduates, like Harvard graduates. These are all people, all elite, and some of them are like from like like India and Egypt and China, and like they all had the same thing in common. Like I'm smart enough to go corporate, but I see a need for something, and like I'm just kind of like go in on it. And so it was one getting around them gave me confidence, right? Like man, like I really do know what I'm doing. And then what Echo and Green did, and it was a woman named Tiffany Johnson. She was like my program officer. Tiffany, I think, is at Luminary now. Tiffany was dope. And she really kind of like taught me how to like put the organization together. Like this is the infrastructure that you need. And then it was going to like the fellowship conferences, sitting in on workshops, and like they really trained me and showed me like this is what you need to do. Like this is how you run a nonprofit. I had ideas that were like completely outlandish when I'm thinking about them in hindsight. And they were just like, nah, man, like those aren't good ideas, but you should kind of invest here. And then it was also like the like when you can say you're an Echo and Green fellow, you get meetings that you wouldn't get normally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that led to other fellowships. That led to the GSBI fellowship out of the Miller Center in Santa Clara, and eventually it led to me being a social entrepreneur in resident at Stanford University. So it opened up a lot of doors and it opened up a lot of funding. And I still rock with them to this day, man. I was just at the All Fellows Conference in Ghana. And before that, we had an opportunity to go out to Colombia. That was where I graduated. My graduation year, we were in Medellin, and that was dope because we ended up getting there early and we stayed in Cartagena, and we got a villa, and it was just me and all these social entrepreneurs, and I got to sit down with them and learn about how they were also putting their businesses together.
Yeah.
And over the years we've interacted with each other. Like, I've hired them as consultants. I'm on Tony Weaver's board. Like, so that's like my family, man.
Yeah, no, that's dope. That's dope. Thank you for sharing that, man. So, can you talk a little bit about like starting to build the infrastructure? Who were the first, or what were the first roles that you hired for when you got enough funding?
Yeah, when I start getting enough funding, the important thing was, okay, Damon, you need to secure your salary, and then you need to make sure that you're investing in the program because your students have to have the best hardware, software, and equipment available so that they can like do well. Like, I had to start getting impact, like real impact. So I had to put money into the program. The good news was because I was fiscally sponsored and I was at United Roots, they wasn't really hitting me for a lot of money. So that was cool. So I was able to give them like a little bit, but I didn't have to like pay for my own building or anything like that. I think the first thing that we started spending like a significant amount of investment in was program staff. Because after a while, I was everything, like I was the funder, I was the CEO, I was the program director, I was the coordinator, I was doing the 101s, I was building the curriculum, I was doing everything. So when I was able to hire staff, they could take over a lot of the student management, and I can step back and kind of focus on like, okay, how do I build out the infrastructure, work on partnerships, do more fundraising, things of that nature. So that ended up being the next stage, right? Like, okay, now I can kind of experiment. I can do more R&D. I can scaffold the curriculum because by then our students were older because they're year over year. So by then I had more experienced students. I had to give them a better curriculum. Then I was able to like reach out to people in the gaming industry and bring them on as instructors and as mentors. So then that meant that I had to do more forward facing work with the adults and a little bit less with the students. I was still interacting with the students. I had to do more, I had to build out my board. Right. So I realized like, yo, I need a board. I need a better website. I need to design the logo. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I needed to do a lot of PR communications work. We had annual events. I needed to be more involved in my events and I needed to make the events bigger. I need to have bigger personalities there. Like, we were able to invite like Tim Schafer from Double Fine or Greg Johnson from Human Nature, like having them come out, right? Having the students see these like larger than life figures that worked on games that they worked on that inspired them. And then more importantly, that were in the classes teaching them the craft. And then what happened is that they became competitive. So when they became competitive, they're getting into the top colleges. USC, UC Santa Cruz, UC
wow.
Berkeley, NYU, right? Like, they're getting into like the top schools. And now the schools are like, yo, man, I got a couple of students from you guys. Like, who are you guys? Right. And now they're also attracting their colleagues because they're like, I got students going to USC and their mentor is Tim Schafer, the CEO of Double Fine. And they're like, how did you manage to get Tim Schafer as your mentor before you even got to college? Oh man, Gameheads. So then I got students in college calling me up and they're like, yo, man, we want to join the program. So that's how I was able to create the reputation, and I couldn't get to the companies, but I was getting to their mentors because we had a reputation amongst game developers who were coming
Okay,
in as mentors and as instructors. I went to them instead. I didn't go to the companies.
got
So
it.
after a
Okay,
while, the companies were like, "Yo, man, which organizations do you think we should invest in?" And they're like, "Yo, we've been volunteering at this organization called Gameheads in Oakland, and like they're legit." And so then, our reputation started to spread a bit. So that was what I started with first. I started like real grassroots, like building relationships with the high schools, building relationships with the community centers, building relationships with the churches, building relationships with the local universities, Cal State East Bay, San Francisco State, Berkeley City College, like the Peralta colleges, like building that reputation, then building a reputation amongst like game developers, and then like doing good work and making sure our students were dope. Like, once I started doing that, like, that was when you started to see the organization kinda take off a little bit.
And so what would you say, like, can you characterize the organization for us right now in terms of kind of like size? Look like you got your own space and it looks really dope from the pictures I saw online. So I was like, damn, like they got
Yeah,
the lounge, they got the
yeah,
like community
yeah,
workspace. Like,
and that happened later. That
yeah,
wasn't like, we're not at United Roots anymore. Yeah, that happened
right,
later.
right, right. So yeah, can you just give us a kind of paint a picture for us of what your org looks like right now?
Right now, we have, what I to my knowledge, the first ever video game center, out of Oakland, California. We have 2 buildings on 1 block. The video game center has, a game room with 3,000 video games. Every console you can think of, we have all of them. We have a chill nook, an art, animation, and engineering lab. We have a full library. Students can check out video games, and they can check out books. We have books in, like, basically all the subjects that we teach. And then, of course, we have like a lounge area, like a chill nook. And we share the space with a PR communication firm called Change Consulting, which is also our PR communication firm that helps us with our PR. Down the block is our other space, which is like it's on the same block, and we have conference rooms, large classrooms. We have sort of like an amphitheater, like a very small amphitheater, an outside eating area. We have kitchens, bathrooms, showers in both buildings. Not this building, the showers in that building, but we have like the full kitchen, full bathroom, all that kind of stuff. And then we have our virtual production studio there, and that is like green screen, black magic cameras, lighting equipment, motion capture suits, hand gesture suits, sound equipment. We have television monitors everywhere. We have like maybe 15 television monitors all over the place. We have cameras in every room for all of our virtual students. Right now, we're at about 8 staff, 4 full-time, 4 part-time. During the year, we generally have about 15 instructors. We've got a fleet of maybe like, I don't know, maybe 500 mentors slash volunteers. And
Wow.
that's just here
What?
in Oakland. We also have a space over in Hawaii. So we have Gameheads Hawaii, and we have space out of the Lilu Kalani Trust or the Lilu Kalani Center. We work with the Lilu Kalani Trust, and they have a center in downtown Honolulu. So we have students at this downtown Honolulu location, and then we also have students on Big Island in Kona, the Kapuka in Kona as well. And then we have like students in 17 different states. They're all virtual. And at the
Okay.
moment, we're working on expansions to the south.
Wow. So I can feel our listeners like itching, like, oh man, like how can I get some of that? Like, so let's turn a little bit to fundraising and like, talk to us about your fundraising journey, picking up where kind of we left off with the echoing green and getting introductions to new funders. What's the fundraising journey been like for you and what's been key in your success on that?
One thing I always tell people, like, somebody shared this with me before. It was through PR. They said it was our PR communications firm, right? They said, doing PR for you is really easy because you actually have a program. And they're like, you'd be surprised. Sometimes we get hired to do PR communications for organizations and they don't have a program. So we end up having to like find a story or, you got to put lipstick on a pig. So one thing I learned early is that I really had to make sure like our program was really good. Like our students were good. Like I always said, like, really good programs have really good students that do really good things, which makes them really good programs, right? Ain't nobody here for me. Like they're not showing up because they're like, like we really like you and we want to give you money so like you can pay your mortgage. It's like, nah, man, we want to see some like impact. We want to see some really, really talented students. So that was like the first thing we did. And I always believe like, look, man, if we have a really good program and we're producing very talented students that are going to transition through high school, college, and into the industry, the funding will come. And I also was like, I was looking at the data, and the data was like, okay, people of color over-index in games, low-income folks over-index in games, as in they play games more, they consider themselves to be gamers, they identify with being video game players. You were seeing, like, the data with, women, was, like, almost 50-50, right? But if you looked at the data, like, African Americans represent 2%, women represented around 20-something percent, Latinos represented 7%, and everybody else was like 2%. Like most of the industry was white and male. But if you really look at every entertainment industry, eventually that entertainment industry would hit a wall in terms of game players, and they would need to diversify. Like you saw it in the film industry, you saw it in the music industry, you saw it in sports, and they would always come to who?
Us.
Exactly, right? Like, at some point, baseball hit a wall, Jackie Robinson. At some point, basketball was like, we didn't invent basketball, but you wouldn't
Right.
know we didn't invent basketball. You'd think we invented it, right? So I was just like, then you look at things like the blaxploitation movement and like,
Yeah.
you look at things like hip hop, you look at things like jazz and blues and rock and roll and all of these things. So I'm like, eventually this is coming to us. And that's when the investment will come in. And I was right, Jordan, but it didn't happen the way I thought it was. And so, fundraising was hard. Like we was really like touch and go. Like it was really like year over year. It was hard. And then something happened in about 2022 or something like that. No, 2020. A black man was murdered on national television. When that happened, you know what I mean? As we know, the whole country shifted, right? And racial justice became really important in the country. And the video game industry kind of woke up. And we knew this. We knew that there was a lot of like people of color in the gaming industry that was trying to get companies to invest in, racial justice, economic justice. Like they wanted them to do that. But they weren't doing it. They would invest in sort of your standard nonprofits. But when that happened, people started asking, like executives started asking, who's the organization that does things around racial justice and economic justice and video games? And everybody was like, Gameheads. So I remember it was like John Hankey put us on. He's the CEO of Niantic, and he put out this statement. And that statement blew up. Then Kotaku wrote us into an article. And we had already been in Polygon, but that article didn't blow up. But the article that Kotaku wrote in was like, yo, if you actually care about organizations that are doing things around economic and racial justice, here goes the organizations, and we were one of them. So one day, man, I was getting phone calls from the board, and they were like, yo, like, what's wrong with the donate button? And I was like, I don't know. You tell me. I was like, what's wrong with the donate button? And they're like, it looked like it's not working. And I was like, what you mean it's not working? And I'm like, man, I ain't paying attention to that donate button. Because
Right.
wasn't nobody donating.
Nobody donating on the website like that, yeah.
So I was like, let me go in and fix it. And I fixed the donate button because they were like, yo, man, I'm getting all these calls from people that are trying to donate money to you guys. And I was like, I said, word? They're like, yeah, man, everybody's like wondering, like they're sending me emails, like they texting me, like, what's wrong with your donate button? I fixed that donate button, man. We raised $20,000 in like 2 weeks just on individual donations alone. And then we started getting flooded by like companies that we had worked with for a while that was giving us a little bit of money here and there, but they were just like, yo, like we think we can start giving you more money now. And like Humble Bundle came to us and said, we want to do a bundle for you guys. And I think in about 4 to 6 months, we raised like a little over $1 million. We were $1 million organization by the end of the summer. And this was the crazy thing. This was around the pandemic, right? So the pandemic, a lot of tech companies were going out of business. And they were hitting us up and they were like, yo, they were hitting up members of our board and they were like, yo, man, we going out of business. Come and get what you want. And we were like, word? So like, Alfonso Hooker, man, he was our board chair. He went down to one tech company, rolled up with a U-Haul truck, filled out the U-Haul truck.
What? For real?
True story. But we didn't have nowhere to put it because it's like, we're all virtual. It's pandemic. So we went and got like a storage place and loaded that place up, man, with like graphic tablets and laptops and PCs and TVs. Like we had everything. And we just sat on it for 2 years. So like we ain't spending no money.
Yeah.
We just raised a little over $1 million. We're not really spending any money because we're virtual.
Right.
and then we sitting on, like, storage, and remember, this is when everybody's getting robbed in Oakland,
Right,
so we're
right,
freaking out. So
right,
that's why
right.
we're like, "No, man," like, we putting all of this in storage, and some of it was at United Roots, but we were, like, freaking out. Like, we had, like, a whole room filled with stuff, and we're, like, scared out of our
Yeah,
mind. And then pandemic starts to end, and I just saw the writing on the wall, and I was like, "Yo, I need to get a space before it get expensive." And, I was
right.
fortunate enough to meet somebody who knew somebody, and they said, "Here, come and check out these 2 spaces in Jack London Square." And, they gave it to us, man, and we had the capital for it, but the thing is because we had been sitting on this equipment, we were able to, like, set the place up immediately, and we had the capital to, like, kinda fix the place up and make it look really, really nice, and that's how we got started.
So so now you're at a place where you're getting money from foundations, but it sounds like you also still you're getting money from the tech sector, from the private sector. Are those like kind of individual agreements, or is that more like corporate social responsibility kind of funding? How does that
Yep.
kind of look for y'all?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, man. So, like, what one thing that we definitely talk to people within corporate social responsibility, but another thing is you want to talk to people within the affinity groups as well. Sometimes the affinity groups at different companies have like a pot of money that they're allowed to give to different organizations. So if you're talking to like the Black Affinity Group at, like, I remember Autodesk, for example, they were able to hit us down a couple years back. I think it was last year with like $20,000. So, you talk to both departments. Some companies have like their social equity or their departments of wells. Some companies have like sometimes two and three different um, departments that kind of focus on fundraising. The other thing is you want to ask yourself, like, well, what do you need to spend money on? Right? Like, you need to spend money on hardware. You need to spend money on software. You need to spend money on instructors. Need to spend money on books. Ask the companies for that. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you have an opportunity to ask them for things that they don't need. But if you wanted to get that stuff, it would cost you a lot of money, and that kind of saves you money, right? You ask people like, hey, you want to volunteer, teach this class for like 6 weeks. That's like, that instructor might have cost you about, anywhere between 40 and $60 an hour. And they're like, full-time employee engineer from, Activision or what have you. And they're going to come in and teach a class for like 3 to 6 weeks. Like, you have the benefit of, one, allowing them to like give back, allowing your students to hear from somebody who's teaching, who's like working in the industry on the cutting edge. But then you also like, be able to, you have an instructor, man, and they're volunteering. So yeah, a lot of our funding comes from corporate, from individual donors. We also sell merchandise at our annual events, doing events and asking companies to sponsor the event. And you can set up like tiers, right? Like, you can sponsor at this level or that level or this level or that level, and that sponsorship will cover the event. And then if there's any excess, you can kind of like apply that to the program, which is in some cases what they want anyway.
Yeah.
And then you also have, your grants that you go after with foundations and whatnot. So we've been a mixed bag over the last couple of years.
Wow. What a phenomenal story, though. Are you concerned at all about, the moment has shifted from, that 2020 moment, and that's an understatement. What are instead of asking what are you concerned about or how that will shift, is what are you doing to try to maintain those relationships with those donors, and the interest and engagement of those folks?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. The thing that's been hard these last couple of years is, one, before the Trump administration took over and started kind of villainizing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, but also like the tariffs has also been like a strain on a lot of tech companies. AI adoption is also making things really challenging. But before that, people were getting laid off. And when people are getting laid off, that means that your contacts leave, so you have to like stay in contact with these companies, but sometimes that can be difficult because of contact leaves. Like we had a great relationship with 2K and then a couple of contacts left and our relationship with 2K is not as strong as it used to be, right? As an example. So you have to stay engaged with the companies and you do that through employees that work there. You do that through engaging them with your program. You do that through, providing them with opportunities. And sometimes you just got to be patient, like they know about you, but they're going through a restructure and they'll double back later. Like, we saw that with Epic where they disappeared for a couple of years, but they eventually came back. They knew about us. The other thing is the thing that we benefited from is that we weren't a DE&I organization. Like we had never used that word. Like I remember when companies started using the word DE&I, we were like, what's that? We didn't know what it was. We were really about like, look, man, what we're doing is we're trying to train students up and our students just so happen to be students of color because we're in the East Bay. Like that's the majority of the demographic here. We serve low income students and the majority of the low income students in the East Bay are diverse, but like that's not all of our students, right? And we don't discriminate. So at the end of the day, we're really about low income students and we have and we're a black owned organization. So when people go to our website or when people engage in our program, like they know what it is. And some students we ain't never said like, look, man, if you're low income and white, you don't belong here. And in many cases, we get a lot of students who are low income and white and they belong here. So that was never an issue with us. We did have to go through a lot of our language and make sure that we changed the language so that we weren't like that so that we didn't, in some cases, depending on your language, you're not in compliance with some of the tech companies, right? And
Sure.
most tech companies will tell you like, yo, man, like most tech companies don't have an issue with DE&I efforts, but they recognize that the language has changed and they just don't want no smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So they've
Mm-hmm.
just changed their language, but for the most part, they're still invested. The real issue is the tariffs. The real issue is that consumer spending is down. The real
Yeah.
issue is that they're spending less money. So that means that they have less capital. So even if they have agreed to give you funding, the amount of hoops that they have to go through to give you the funding is just bigger now. So you have to
Yeah.
plan, you know what I mean? Like I remember waiting, man, at one point I had to wait like 6 months just to get $30,000 from one of our funders, like 6 months because they had to go through a lot more hoops. And that was just 30 grand. Like that wasn't
Yeah.
even a real grant. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's just how long it took. So there is a lot of like, you have to adjust for it. You have to adjust your language. You have to stay on top of your funders. You have to make sure that you have things to talk to them about, like, just, you have to make sure that you're celebrating your wins, that you're sending them annual reports. Like we're constantly putting out videos and constantly putting out things on social media. You have to make sure that you have good storytelling, and then you got to be patient, man. And you got to, and then you have to tighten your belt as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things there was a lot of initiatives that we had that we no longer have. And the one last thing that I'll say is that it's really, really important to form partnerships now. If I'm a funder and there's 10 organizations coming to me and all of them are asking me for like say $50,000, but like three of those organizations get together and come to me and say, we'll do what everybody else is saying they'll do, but we'll do it for $75,000 and we'll figure out a way to like work well in a sandbox. You have a greater opportunity to get funding that way.
Yeah. No, that's real. That's 100% real. Thank you for that. Super insightful on the fundraising tip. Final question: in your journey as a nonprofit executive director, organizational leader, right? Going from where you started to where you've been, you've learned a lot. If you're writing a guidebook, so what are the main chapters of that guidebook on organizational leadership and resilience?
I think it's all about your culture and it's all about the people that you put around you. I think if you have good people in your organization, they'll bring good people to your organization. If you treat the people in your organization, your staff and your students very well, there is no end to the amount of things they'll do for you. Like I grew up in nonprofits. I know that we don't have typically don't have the capital to pay people what you could get when you work at Apple, but I treat my staff really well. Like they set their own hours. I don't micromanage them. I'm not over their shoulders. I trust them. I give them all their own island, so that they have autonomy. Whatever we get, they get. You know, if we get anything from companies, whether it's games or computers or laptops or tickets, that goes to my staff. You know, they get everything. Anything I get, they get. So my thing would be like, you have to create good culture, you know, and the reason why, you know, I treat my staff well is, you know, that trickles down to the students. You can't treat your students well, but you don't treat your staff well. And I've been at organizations like that where they treat the students well, but they don't treat the staff well. You got to treat everybody well, man. And when you create that community, and that community is comfortable, like the reason why our space doesn't look like a typical youth space is because we want adults here too. And when you treat people like that and you create a really comfortable space and you build an ecosystem, like and an ecosystem that goes beyond just your building, you know, you start attracting good people. And those good people will come to you and they want to help. And then you have to be mission driven. Like nothing is bigger than the mission. I'm not bigger than the mission. Students not bigger than the mission. Like I tell my students, I'm like, yo, man, like I'm not in charge of y'all. You know what I mean? Like I work for you guys, but I have a job and you guys have a job. And then my students respect me for that. I was like, yo, part of your job is to hold me accountable. If I'm not doing things that you really need, then you need to get on my line. Just like if you're not doing things you're supposed to do, I'm gonna get on your line. And you create this like sense of accountability. And also, man, creating third places where people can go and they feel comfortable and they're respected and they can be their authentic self and people care about them. And we don't really care too much about politics. We can disagree and like love and respect each other. I think that for me as a leader is the most important thing. And then you gotta hustle for your, you know, for your community, man. Like you gotta go all out for them, and you gotta like show them that like I go all out for you guys because you deserve it. And I think if you do that, you end up building a really happy place. And when you build that, people want to come and they want to be a part of it. And that's how you get like really, really special people to be a part of your organization.
Wise words, man. Wise words. I know many executive directors, experienced ones that have big organizations that would do well to heed your advice there,
Hmm.
in particular around how you treat staff and how you create a place where people want to be. So, man, thank you for leaving us with that. Thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on the
man.
podcast. This has been a true pleasure. Folks are going to love this interview. So, really, thank you for your time. Keep in touch.
All right. I appreciate you,
Appreciate you.
Jordan, man. Thank you for having me, man. This is great.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to How to Build a Nonprofit. If you liked the episode, check out the show notes for a link to donate to our guest organization and give us a rave review while you're at it. Feel free to leave comments and questions on your app about what intrigued you most. If you have any suggestions for future guests, email us at howtobuildanonprofit@gmail.com.